recognize that? Yep. It's pretty cool. Hi, I'm Jamie. This is Dead Dodge Garage, and this is my dream race car build. If you're watching this video, you've probably been following along as we've pieced it together, but in case you don't know, this is my 1966 Plymouth Barracuda called the Garbage Can Cuda. It has a 66 dart nose. It has a 273 that will hopefully spin to ridiculous RPMs, sitting roughly where the hood used to be. It's got a 4-speed in the middle, a slick shift that I built on the channel. It's got an 8 3/4 rear, and obviously gigantic Mickey Thompson slicks. In the last episode, we made those slicks fit on the car, finally. We pieced together suspension front and rear, brakes front and rear, made the brake pedal do stuff, installed the rear bumper, kinda, taillights that don't work, the drivetrain. We did all kinds of things, but none of these systems are quite finished. I'm hoping to take this car to the No Name Nationals this year. I've been hoping to do that for like 3 years, but I think this is the time it's finally gonna happen. Maybe. In case you're not aware, the No Name Nationals is an event for smaller YouTube channels that want to drag race their project cars. It's in Sikeston, Missouri, and to get there, I'd have to leave, let's say, 3 weeks from today. The car is exactly how you saw it at the end of the last episode, so to make that happen, we're going to have to do a lot of things. Let's dive in. I partly haven't been working on the Barracuda because I've had tons of other stuff going on here, like putting a roof on the shop and engine videos and broken mail trucks and making Imperials run again. All sorts of things, really. And we spent all of last week on it, so it kind of needed a break. The other thing was I was waiting for some important parts, and they are now here. In this box on the right, we've got all of the missing 8 3/4 brake parts from Mike. Thank you, Mike. In this box, we've got another important part. That is a set of bucket seat tracks from an early A-body. Now, they're not going to directly fit this floor, and they're not going to directly fit the seat either, but the nice thing about these early tracks is they are height adjustable. You can change the angle and dial in exactly what you want. And that seems like a really nice thing to have. A gentleman named Steve reached out and offered these to me for a reasonable price. He dropped them in the mail, and now they're here. I should probably open this mangled box and make sure they're in okay shape. Anyway, thanks, Steve. So for whatever reason, the floor was revised in these cars in 1966, and the tracks from 63 to 5 cars don't just fit. The driver's side actually does line up with the holes. The lever here to adjust the forward to back position is like right up against the door and the rubber. I'll probably have to bend that, but I think I'm going to leave it there because I can offset the seat on here anywhere I want, really. That just leaves the holes over here to deal with. They don't match these tracks in any way at all. So I set this one in place, bolted it down, set that one where it goes. This was kind of tight. Had it down flat on the ground, then I measured at the front and the back and got them square. Now I've paint marked the hole locations on the underside, and I'll be able to drill those out. Note, the studs are already missing from this track where they would have gone into the floor, so that's convenient. Got the track drilled out. It's mounted in here now, although everything's still loose. Note, I still need to weld up the floor here, and this hump is going to have to get dealt with, so this is certainly not a final install, but with them attached to the floor, I can set the width again, and then I'm going to run 2 straps straight across at the front and the back. I've got a stack of these steel strappy brackety thingies. They're from some crappy shelves that I never put together. I've had these in the back of the shed forever, and I'm going to use 4 of these to make the cross pieces to mount those seats. Now, you'd think 4 would be front and rear, left seat and right seat, but this stuff's a little dinky, so I'm going to double them up. I've got them in the vise. I'm drilling all 4 together and then cutting them with the bandsaw. Poorly, of course. Strappy thingies are bolted down, and now I've got these marked with locations for the bolt holes for this seat. There is one small complication, and that is there are nuts and threads sticking up here that'll kind of sort of hit the bottom of the seat. So we'll probably have to put spacers here. I could also cut the threads off and like grind these smooth. I don't know if I can be bothered to do all that. The seat's a little high already, but again, the tracks are adjustable, so the nice thing there is I can change it. I'm going to loosen all of these bolts once the seat is on there and tight. I'm going to lower it, angle it, and then scoot it as far back as possible. Yep, it's a seat. Now I'm a little to the left of the steering wheel, and I certainly could have offset the seat more that way. The problem is, someone put a shifter here. I could have like reconfigured the entire mounting to move the shifter that way, but I don't want to. I already made a linkage that works. So that could be a future upgrade. For now, I'm just going to be over here. When I fully extend the clutch there, my leg is like straight, basically. So that's perfect. I can put my foot on the firewall. I don't have to strain to get there. And when I'm off the clutch, I fit pretty comfortably. One thing that may become a problem is there's really not much space in this area for a throttle pedal, partially because somebody beat the firewall in this area of the floor savagely with a sledgehammer. The adjustment handle actually does clear the shut door, so that's good. I'm gonna leave it alone. And now the seat is finished. Yeah, we're gonna leave the nasty sharp edges I didn't grind down for some reason. And now I can take it out because, you know, the floor. There are very few problems with this car I'm not willing to solve with a hammer. And now for the task I've been dragging my feet trying not to deal with. The valve train on this engine. I've kind of got multiple issues. One of those issues, I really wanted to put solid lifters in this engine, but when I was trying to put it together for the last episode, well, 4 of them weren't here yet, and so I put the hydraulic lifters in. I also put in these 3/8 push rods, which turned out to be the perfect length for those hydraulic lifters. Problem is, those 3/8 push rods don't really fit in those lifters very well, so I decided to change this up. Oh, also, there was the whole, the rockers are hitting the valve spring retainers thing. The other lifters have the bigger sockets, which will take a 3/8 push rod, but because they're shorter inside, these push rods are too short, and they're the only 3/8 option I have. Okay, fine. We could do 5/16 push rods, I guess. We could always upgrade this in the future. I have a set right here that were far too long for Mark's engine, and I figured, they'll be perfect for this with the solid lifters. No, they're not. They're like a 1/4 inch too short. You know what'll work perfectly with factory 273 rockers and factory 273 lifters? Factory 273 push rods. So now I'm gonna go clean these up and install them. In the future, I'd very much like to replace these with some 3/8 push rods, but hey, the more stock parts, the cooler, right? I cleaned up those stock push rods on the bench grinder wire wheel thingy, hit them with some brake clean, wiped them off, dropped a couple in here to check, and what do you know? I put the adjuster right back where it was, and it's probably perfect. Although now, I'll actually have to check these with a feeler gauge. It's a while later, and for the 3rd time, I have cleaned and lubricated a set of lifters for this engine. I'm sure this will be the last time. Nose itches. Now, as I explained in the last video, these are a factory 273 style lifter. They're known as dumbbell lifters, for obvious reasons. Not all 273s use these, but the earlier years did. I got these from Oregon Cam Grinding, and in talking with Ken, he said, well, you could probably run those on a hydraulic cam. It's been done for race use. He did, however, say in high lift applications, you need to check and verify that the little open section in the dumbbell does not drop all the way out of the lifter bore. See, what can happen with a high lift cam is the base circle is ground away such that the difference between back here and the tip of the cam lobe is much larger. As that happens, to meet the base circle, this lifter has to drop farther and farther into the bore. I told him I'd be using this cam, something in the 498 lift neighborhood. I can't actually remember. And he said he thought I would probably be okay, but that I needed to check. And I'm glad I did, because I am not okay. I can actually see just a little hint of the dumbbell section on this lifter and on this lifter. The reason that is a problem is because anytime that section drops below the bore, you're going to lose oil pressure because your pressurized oil from the galley or gallery or the oil feedy holes back here will just be pouring out around that lifter. It's subtle, but you can see that dark ring alongside the lifter there. That is that opening. If I push it up, it's gone. Right when it hits the base circle, it's back. Here's another lifter held next to it for reference. You can see exactly what we're up against here. It's just so far down to meet that base circle that it's not gonna work. Sure glad I figured that out after I cleaned and greased them. And I cleaned all the lube off the Johnson lifters and put them in a box, which they're now coming back out of because, yeah. You know what? I think I've had enough. We'll revisit this mess tomorrow. At least I mounted a seat. It's the next day, and I'm preparing to tear all of my hair out over this pushrod to lifter fitment issue. On the left is a random used one I found. In the middle is one from my 360 cam, which I'll be reusing in my 318. And on the right is one of our new ones. I've got these arranged from largest to smallest cup for the pushrod here. Obviously, this one has some more taper to it, and it looks like it was designed to fit a 3/8 pushrod. The middle one is smaller, and the one on the right, the one we're going to use, is the smallest of all of them. I strongly considered pulling all of the cups out of these lifters and transplanting them into our new ones, but because these lifters are from different manufacturers, all of the diameters are different, and there's just no way that works. So I drew a marker line across the cup in each one of these, and I test rolled one of our 3/8 push rods in them. You can see the line that resulted in this one. That looks pretty good. You can see the line that resulted in this one. It's higher up in that cup, but it still looks kinda okay. This one, that line is right up at the top, and that's not really what we want. But I do want you to notice the amount of engagement between all three of these is essentially the same. It's a really thin line there. I was concerned that the contact point would be right at this very top, but it's not. It actually is down inside the cup. Obviously, this situation is not ideal. I'd much rather use a lifter like this where the pushrod fits down in there a little bit better, but I don't have many choices here. In fact, I don't have any choices here except to run these. Well, it's that or order pushrods and wait weeks, and that is just not going to happen. And I say this after testing every other lifter and pushrod combination I have in stock. This was close. This is one of those slightly longer ones from Mark's engine. And as you can see, I've got the adjustment backed off all the way on the rocker here. The cup is contacting, and it's still preloaded into the lifter just a little bit. After wasting countless hours on the lifter and pushrod debacle, then ultimately going back to the setup I had there before and calling it a day, I'm now dealing with the other slightly more obnoxious issue, which is rocker to valve spring retainer contact. Now this is the driver's side set of rockers, and I only have 2 witness marks over here, one right there, and then a slight one right here. As you can probably see here, each of these arms is slightly different. And of course, each valve height and retainer installed height is going to be a little bit different too. But I'm going to grind a little notch in each one of these in that basic area, so hopefully we have 0 issues. While they're apart, I'm going to clean them again, and I am going to lightly sand and polish the shaft. Hopefully this will allow for freer movement of the rockers, and it will increase the oil clearance ever so slightly. You can see these shiny areas. Those are obviously where the arms ride. There are a couple nasty gulled up spots, so I'm going to try and polish those out if I can. Now, of course, there are terrible marks inside some of these arms that correspond with the marks on the tubes, so I'm going to clean out the inside of these with a sanding roll. At the same time, I'm going to clean up the sides here. Some of them have shiny marks where they rub on the retainers. We'll just make sure there are no spots there where galling or nastiness is going on. And I guess I'll polish up the feet a little bit too. Some of them are rusty. Hey, good enough for me. Also, yes, there's more roofing happening. You could call what I'm doing here blueprinting, kind of, I suppose. See these shiny rub marks? Working on smoothing out these sides, and as you can see, they're nowhere near flat as cast. Or as forged, whatever. Anyway, much better. You're loud. I've got all the operations done on these rockers. They're polished up inside, they're ground here, cleaned up there. I did also clean up all of these on the sides. They were pretty gnarly looking. These spacer rings seem to be pretty nice, so I'm not worried about those. Now I lubricate all of this and put this mess back together. Okay, I've realized this shaft was in the wrong way. The oil holes were facing uphill instead of downhill the way they're supposed to. That could have something to do with the excessive oil squirting out around these rockers compared to the other ones. There it is assembled the right way, and there they are installed again. Now all I have to do is every bit of that a second time. Oh, also pre-lube to fill the shafts again and adjust all the valves again, because although I did put these rockers right back where they were, the ones that were contacting, well, what do you know, they're way off. And I did ever so slightly resurface here and here, so things could change. Oh, and I messed with this one. It's quite a while later, and I've got both sets of rockers sitting on here, but all the push rods back out because it occurred to me I should probably check my work. All good over here, tons and tons of room. Most of them on this side are totally fine. That one's almost fine. Fine. Not fine at all. That was the one that was like sticking and popping before, so obviously it was the worst to begin with. But yeah, for some reason, these two pieces just really want to be together. So I'm going to have to take a bunch more meat off there. Thankfully, we've got a big fat witness mark where the retainer was rubbing here, so now I just grind all that away. I'm going to actually put in a divot. I was mostly just dressing this. A bunch more grinding later, and all of these finally fit. Now that all that's sorted out, we are absolutely not going to talk about the fact that a couple of these push rods ever so slightly touch the head. Nope, not even going there. That's a future problem. Now we're doing this again. Well, I've got the oil hole lined up for the passenger side again, and it continues to not have any obvious signs of oil squirting out. I know it's lined up because with this bolt loose, there's a happy little fountain of oil in there. So we're definitely good. The shaft is full, and you can actually see some oil coming out around the retainers because there isn't excellent sealing there. So we know there's oil in this shaft, but I'm still not seeing it blow out everywhere. Now, when these were apart, I flipped this shaft side for side. This one appeared to be correct. The holes, as I understand, are supposed to point toward the springs. I've done a bunch of reading on that, and I have verified it against sets of rockers I've got here. So I'm pretty sure they're right. These shafts don't have the banana grooves coming out from the oil hole that's located in the center. Should they have that in this application? I don't know. As you can see, there is some oil getting through to these holes, which are supposed to drip oil down toward the retainer end. I think I'm just going to have to run this. As I was turning this thing over to pre-lube, I didn't see spurting oil on this side anymore, and I'm pretty sure that is because I reversed the shaft. As near as I can tell, this is right, and I think I'm just going to leave them where they are. If these were stamped steel rockers, I found multiple service manual entries for them indicating the location of these little notches and where they should be pointing. That doesn't match with these shafts, and so I'm not going to chase my tail trying to make it match. Once this thing's up and running, I will be able to pull these covers and run it that way. We'll be able to see right there if there's sufficient oiling getting up here or not. If not, obviously, we're going to have to do something. But for now, I'm just calling this good and moving on. You know, it's kind of amazing how much stuff I've just thrown together without paying attention over the years that just worked. But the moment you start paying attention and trying to make sure everything's right, nothing is right. The more of these builds I do, the more I learn. And the more I learn, the more I find not good, and more things I need to learn. I don't know why I always put off port matching aluminum intake manifolds to the end of a build. Oh, yes, I do. I absolutely hate it. Anyway, we're halfway there now. And there's the other side done. Finally! Remember, the goal here was just to make the ports in the head and in this tunnel ram match. They're not as big as a 360 port, as you can see here. They're still quite a bit smaller than that, but they do meet the 360 port size at the top. I opened the head up to match that because that's where the manifold was at. Now I clean out like 20 pounds of aluminum dust and take this nipple out, replace it with a plug, get a thermostat and housing in this thing, drill some holes in that thermostat. I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but anyway, sometime soon I'll be installing this. Look at all those chunks. I don't feel like I removed that much material, but the pile says otherwise. I've cleaned the inside of the tunnel ram thoroughly. Still need to clean the outside. We'll get there in a minute. But I'm working on some ancillary bits here right now. I removed the nipple that would have gone to the bypass hose because this is the hole for the later style, and we have a water pump for an early style. I could have looked around to find a small nipple that would fit in this spot and then use the early hose, but I didn't want to do that, so I just plugged it on both sides, and instead, for bypass, I'm going to drill probably 3 holes in this thermostat around the center section. This is the 180 thermostat that was in there. It's relatively new, and I think I'm just going to put that back in. This is the gasket that was in there. Nice. Orange silicone, my least favorite thing in the world. This thing has been re-siliconed a couple times, and I know that because there's a good bit of blue on here as well. This is an aftermarket chrome thermostat housing. I absolutely hate these things. In fact, in past videos, I've slam dunked these straight into garbage cans, scrap piles, and people have said, "Oh, why would you throw that away?" Well, because they corrode to bits, like from new. They're absolute junk, but I don't really have any other great options, so I probably will be using that. I do have a factory housing here, which I much prefer, but this one's not in very good shape either, so chrome it is, I guess. You know, yeah, junk. I say this for a reason. Flattening this stupid chrome thermostat housing. Can't find a sanding block anywhere. My bench sander is destroyed. My standing sander needs paper. So I just stuck a piece of sticky back to my steel workbench, and now I'm working this thing back and forth. You can see there it's not quite flat yet. Anyway, sometime soon this whole surface will be shiny and we should be good to go. Sandpaper's getting dull. You know what? That's pretty good. All right, that's a pretty big hole. Is one enough? One's probably enough. It'll allow air to escape and move a little bit of coolant through it. I'm afraid if I drill a second one that size, well, it might move too much coolant. Yeah, we'll stick with the one big hole and we'll put it forward. Of course, the engine will be tilted somewhat in the car, and so this will allow any air bubbles to run uphill and come out there. Oh, good. Apparently, I stole my own thermostat gasket for some other project, so now I can't finish this. Well, now I'm zigzagging to another project. I'm going to install the distributor and the shaft that drives it before I put the tunnel ram in the way. Now this is a cast iron direct connection electronic ignition distributor. This is what Dale used in the Demon in the early mid-70s. It's got a tach drive attachment, which is great because I have a cable drive tach for this car. It's got a super light set of springs in it right now. I'm not sure how big the advanced curve is. I think it's actually stock still. So I'm probably going to end up modifying that. As you can see, the wires have already been cut. This thing was running an MSD box in the car before he upgraded to the MSD distributor. So I'm going to be able to wire it to one in my car. The basic idea behind the super light spring is that the advance is going to come in almost immediately after the engine starts. Certainly by like 2,000 RPM. You know, that might work fine for what we're doing here. And I don't want to take this thing apart. So I think I'll throw it in as it is for now. Admire this crazy looking reluctor wheel. What we're looking at here is basically just an electronic conversion in a single point cast iron distributor body. Oh, it also doesn't have vacuum advance because race car. After a recent Just Mopar Joe video, I've been reminded that I need to be checking the interface between the distributor drive shaft and the intermediate shaft. We do have a decently tight fit here, so I think we're good. Note this is a pinned shaft, which is good. We don't have to worry about the gear spinning on there. I'm going to lubricate this thing and drop it in, ensuring that the clocking ends up putting the number 1 plug wire where I want it on the cap. There it is installed. This was a nice gear install with no intake in the way. I could see the flat inside that drive gear, so it was easy to get it pointed the way I want. Incidentally, this distributor has the rotor directly in line with that line, so I pointed it vaguely toward number 1, and the rotor ended up there as well. And now to make the tachometer connection. I've already removed the dust cap that was sitting on there. You can see the opening is sort of like a keyhole. You line the keyhole on this cable, and it should slide right in. Although it's just occurred to me I should probably grease this thing first. I lubricated the tach cable with engine oil. Some of it even stayed in there. Yeah, I might be in the market for a new one of those. Note the artful routing of the cable around the brake master cylinder. Well, now things are getting kind of real. There's a set of spark plugs in this head, although they're not actually torqued down yet. I wasn't sure I could do that. I'm working on installing the driver's side header. This is, of course, done kind of through the fender well and kind of in pieces. The only time I've ever pulled these headers was when the engine was out of the way, so I didn't actually know how, well, I'm not going to say easy, but relatively easy it would be to install them with the engine in there, but it's not too bad. This side comes into 4 different pieces. You've got the 2 middle cylinders. You've got the rear cylinder, which loops over those and kind of in front of / over the brake master cylinder. And then you have the number 1 cylinder, which comes up over them and then down through this gap here. It actually takes 2 separate pipe sections to make that connection. And someone had engineered this. It's 3 hose clamps that were kind of sort of holding those 2 sections together. I'm hoping that won't be necessary, but I guess we'll find out. I did have to loosen the master cylinder to get this all situated, but I can bolt it back down now. I've been asked a good few times why I went back to a single pot pump and pray old school factory master cylinder on this car. And it's a simple answer. The dual reservoir master stuck out too far and it interfered with this header pipe. That is why it has been brutalized as you see it here. There also used to be this ridiculous heat shield kind of wedged in here. I deleted that, happily. The pipe is still ugly, but I would like to have that rebuilt by a local exhaust shop. That's my genius plan anyway. Of course, in addition to the Super Smash tube, these headers just look in general like they've been beaten with the ugly stick. And there's a very good reason I haven't fixed that yet. You see, if you break in your camshaft by revving your engine to 2,000 RPM for 20 minutes through a set of freshly coated headers, well, that coating is going to be cooked immediately. So my genius plan here is to install them temporarily, get the engine broken in, then remove them, fix this garbage, strip them, and paint them. Like many of my plans, this might not happen. They might just stay ugly forever. Incidentally, if you or someone you know owns a set of these early A-body fender well small block headers and they look significantly nicer than mine, well, let me know, if you want to rehome those things. I'd always figured on painting these headers white. I'm kind of into that look. It's pretty classic. But someone in the comments on the last video said, paint them gold, and I'm now convinced that is the best idea ever. If you ask me, the only header gaskets worth using in the known universe are the Remflex brand. They've always worked really well for me as long as I torque things properly. Even slightly warped headers, or absolutely destroyed ones like this, they tend to work pretty well. I bought a set of those for the car, At a cost of 40 bucks, I don't want to destroy them now and then buy another set later. So for now, I've installed these with a set of TTI header gaskets. Now TTI, for my money, makes the best headers. Their header gaskets, maybe not so much. Anyway, the driver's side headers are on and torqued. Yay! Now we're getting fancy. I'm trying to permanently install the driver's side cover here. Well, permanent. You know what that means. But I'm having a bit of a problem with the T-handles. You see, these are actually two separate pieces. The T-handle is a nut. Then there's a stud, which is supposed to be threaded into the head, and then the handle grabs onto that. For whatever reason, people always turn them around backwards and screw the studs into the handles. The problem is the studs are able to screw too far into the T-handles. So then, if they were used on like sheet metal covers, you might only have this much extension. And for the MTs, at least to get them started, you need more like this much. The studs have little Allen heads in them, but they're so tight in these things, they will not come out. I've already allegedly stripped one or two of them. I'm going to have to like heat these and spray them, and I just don't even want to mess with that right now. So I guess it's 3 for tonight. It's the next day, and I reckon it's finally time to install the tunnel ram. As mentioned, I am using some 360 intake gaskets for this. I've put some silicone around the water ports on the head side. That's doing 2 jobs. 1, ensuring we get a decent seal, and 2, holding the gasket in place, I hope. I went to great lengths to make the intake ports on the head and the manifold match, but I am now using a gasket that does not quite match those. A commenter said that could do weird things to airflow, and they might be right, but we're still doing it. I sure am glad they make these things out of aluminum. Now, as I always do, I sealed the intake ends, or China walls, with Right Stuff silicone. I did have to change the setup over here because the shape of the intake underneath is a little bit different than they usually are. There's typically a little jog toward the rear right here, toward this water port, and that's not present here. So I've had to extend the silicone all the way out to the corner, and I'm hoping it'll be able to seal on this. I guess we'll find out. Anyway, I'll try to line this up absolutely perfectly, which will never happen. And then just kind of drop it in place. Wow, actually that's pretty good. Now I need some bolts. I actually have these fancy ARP bolts left over from Mark's build. I don't really love the look of that. I kind of prefer factory stuff, but I have them here and they're black and they look nice, and I guess we'll just go ahead and use them. I won't be using a factory throttle hold down. I won't be using a factory throttle return spring, so we could just pop all of these bolts in the holes, torque them down, and we're done. And there it is, actually bolted in place. I did slightly forget to spray all this down with glass cleaner and wipe it off a little bit, you know, for some shine, but it looks pretty good regardless. Verifying the port alignment is a good idea, and it's pretty easy to do with the tunnel ram because you can just look straight down it. These over here on the passenger side look pretty darn good, actually. The driver's side is a slightly different story. First, you can see the ports are down a little bit here. We're looking at number 1 and number 3. Also, the intake is shifted forward relative to the head ever so slightly. So you can see that little bit of overhang on the sides. Well, it's even worse back here at the back. Number 5 port, it's almost like an 1/8 inch of head sticking out at the bottom. Number 7 is similar, but I must have gotten the bottom of that one ground a little bit lower. It's actually pretty easy to see out here that that rear corner on the driver's side is down lower than the front, and both corners on the other side. See the overhang here where it's sticking up toward the valve cover? Well, this rear set of runners, they're almost flush. There's some different possible causes for that. The cylinder head may be off this way ever so slightly on the deck. The machining on the intake face may be a little bit off this way. Either way, I don't have much choice but to go ahead and run it. It may not be perfect, but it should be good enough. Did you know I actually have a lot of fin valve covers for small blocks? Well, I've got my fair share anyway. I got the one filler cap I could find to fit by bending those tangs slightly. Also, there's a little baffle that was under this cap. I moved it to under the breather. That way you can, actually put oil in this stupid thing. I ended up putting one of the universal breather grommet thingies in this hole, and I siliconed the little notches where cap teeth would have gone. As soon as that sets up, I'll drop a universal Mr. Gasket breather in there. Then I just need a breather with like a 1 inch or somewhere around there nipple on the end to fit in this, and we'll be in business. I learned why the studs wouldn't come out of these T-handles. Loctite. Anyway, I extracted some of them and I found some extra studs. That's the good news. Also had to modify this one because somebody put a brake master cylinder right in the way. Now again, I'm not restoring these headers right now, but I do have to do something about this. Surprise, surprise, the rusty and paper thin crap right here did not want to weld very well, so I had to like build it up and chase it and whatever. It's not a hole anymore. I decided to make a list for the Barracuda. I ran out of room. Now I'm working on getting the passenger side header in, but of course it can't possibly be easy. You see, this car now has a scatter shield to protect my ankles from clutch explosions. It did not have that before, and Hedman certainly didn't have that in mind when they designed these headers. Yeah, they're fender well headers, but only 2 of the pipes go through the fender well. The other 2 go down here where conventional headers would go, and then loop over here to connect with the others. Here's the primary tube for number 2. It is very, very on that scatter shield. So I'm probably gonna have to dent it. I don't really wanna cut a section out of the shield. I feel like that's a really bad idea. The other separate pipe is the one for number 8, and currently I can't even get it through that opening. Oh, this sucks. It's a really long time later. Like, I think I have 6 hours today into getting these headers attached and these 2 valve covers in, and they don't even have breathers yet, and then the intake on. Anyway, this is bolted on. Now, I'll have you know that number 2 pipe is still very much on the scatter shield, but it went into the collector and it bolted down with some prying and some ruining of this inner fender well over here. So I guess it's fine. Hopefully it's fine. There are probably going to be leaks, but you know, race car. Well, it's something. Lots more to go. Like installing that thingy and wires and carbs and maybe a cooling system sometime. But this is definitely progress. It's Monday morning, and I've just remembered something. This car always had a GM one-wire style alternator because it hasn't had a voltage regulator for like decades. Do I rip this off and then try and go find the crappy thing I made for the one-wire forever ago, or I don't know. Started looking at pulleys and stuff, and yeah, I'm just tired of scratching my head on the accessory debacle. So I want to move on to something easy, which is robbing these carbs off the banana to put back on the small block tunnel ram. This thing is so nice to work on. Pulling these carbs took like 2 minutes. It's amazing what having no body in the way will do. And now it sits like this for like ever. I'm not exactly excited about parting out the banana, but these carbs were always for this project. I just borrowed them for that. Oh, I should have flipped them front to back. That one's way better looking. Anyway, this is a pair of Edelbrock 500 CFMs in case you were curious. You may be asking yourself, Jamie, why aren't you running Hollies? Well, because that's not how I roll. All right, it's tempting. The coordination's pretty good, but it's gotta be the stacks. Well, yeah, no, yeah, stacks, I think. I've got the car back up in the air now, and I'm running head first at the biggest thing I do not want to deal with at all, and that is building a fuel system essentially from scratch. In its previous life, this thing was street driven. It was drag raced at some point, but it was always run with a factory tank, factory sending unit, factory frame line. We're not exactly making 1 billion horsepower here, and I probably could have gotten away with a mechanical fuel pump and a largely stock system, but that's not what I want. I'm kind of future-proofing, if that makes sense. I want to just get rid of all that stuff now and have a nice electric pump and a return line setup that'll be good for whatever ends up going in here later. That could just mean a bigger, more ridiculous small block. That could mean boost. Who knows? At some unknown point in the future, I do plan to ditch the factory tank and go to a fuel cell like a real race car. However, to do that, I'll have to come up with a firewall of some kind, and I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to configure that, what with the pass-through into the trunk and all the factory panels and things that the Barracuda has. Don't even want to think about that for now, so we're going to make this work. So now I'm scabbing together random pieces to configure a fuel system from scratch. Here's the important part. This is a Holley inline fuel pump. I actually removed this from the Red 71 Challenger way back when we put a Hemi in that. This would have been no good for that swap, and so it's been surplus ever since. I've been saving it for this car. I actually have the slightly leaky fuel pressure regulator from that car as well, and I was planning to use this, but I think I'm going to do something a little different. A while back, I got this box of random fuel system garbage from Tom Hergert with Rocket Restorations. This came with a charger that was being resto modded, which he had bought. It wasn't even a complete system. It's like a sump kit and a pump thing and a filter housing that also went in the tank. Craziest thing I've ever seen. Seems kind of archaic by today's standards. These days you can just buy an EFI tank and you're done. It also came with this big fuel log thing, which I could use to connect to these carburetors, but it was kind of ugly. This Aeromotive fuel pressure regulator is kind of ugly too. I certainly don't want this crazy anodized crap under the not hood in the Barracuda, but it'll do the job, and so I think we're probably going to run this. As you can see, it's got dual outlets on the sides there. It's got the feed here on the front, and then a return fitting on the bottom. Your typical cheapo regulator for a carbureted application looks like this. It's got an inlet and 2 outs. it doesn't really have a return to the tank, which we need. If we don't have that, well, this pump is just going to be deadheaded against the regulator and heating up the fuel and itself and doing bad stuff. We really want a return from the engine compartment running back into the tank. That way we can set the pressure there, and this pump will always be circulating enough fuel to keep itself cool. Given that the entire vibe of this car is 1967, 8, whatever era drag racer, I don't exactly want to put this on display, but I'm kind of going to have to. For functionality's sake, I don't have many other options. I do have this ridiculously modern looking 40 micron fuel filter. This will get mounted under the car and, well, no one will ever know. Why'd I wait to pull this old line until now? You know, there's a header in the way and an oil filter and an engine. You know, I put new valve stem seals in 3 of these rims. Guess where the 4th one is? Now, there's something you need to know about me. I'm kind of AN fitting stupid. I've really never done much with this stuff, aside from building lines for the Red 71 and a return line from the turbo for the turbo slant. So I'm kind of figuring things out as I go. This is dash 10 AN line. This is going to be our massively overkill feed from the back up to our regulator. This is dash 8. This is going to be our return. The individual carb feeds are going to be made out of dash 6. I'm pretty sure dash 6 would have been sufficient for this entire fuel system. And this engine only makes like 300 horsepower. But this is what was in this random kit, and we've got all the fittings to match, so I'm going to go ahead with that. These are O-ring boss fittings, so named because they've got a boss for an O-ring. On today's episode of Everything Takes Literally Forever, the fuel pump is mounted, and I've even got AN fittings in it. You're going to notice this one's little, and this one's big. This is a dash 6, and the reason I'm using dash 6 here is because that is the size of AN fitting for 3/8 line. 3/8 line is what I'm going to run down into this tank. Currently it has 5/16 line. We'll deal with that in a minute. And the fuel filter is mounted. I actually made a bracket. Isn't that fancy? It's hanging down a little lower than it needs to be. It's mounted to the factory seat reinforcement bracket over here. It's spaced down off the floor a good bit. It protects the filter and the fittings from flying rocks, I guess. It's pretty cool, and I'm proud of that. I actually got it to fit perfectly on the filter bracket and the car in one try. So anyway, the sending unit. I installed this thing brand new in 2014, not that it looks brand new anymore, and I learned a pretty valuable lesson with it. Don't use the reproduction lock rings because they don't fit right and they'll go in there crooked, and then your sending unit leaks and you fill it with gas at the AM PM and well, suddenly there's a puddle and you got to go drive your car around in circles to burn the fuel, which isn't hard with a 360, a 4-speed, and 410 gears. Anyway, I'm going to pull this thing out. I have a brilliant idea, I think. Still looks pretty good, actually. And yeah, that float's full of gas. It's all too common with these replacement floats. Here's the factory replacement anyway, A-body sending unit. As you can see, it's got a 5/16 fuel line and no return line whatsoever. We need a bigger fuel line, we need a 3/8, and we need a return fitting. So here's what I have in mind. I've got a pair of fittings here that are bulkhead type fittings, meaning they go through a hole and then they have an O-ring to seal. You tighten the nut down, squish the O-ring, and then you've got a wider tight connection going through a plate or something. This one just ends right there. It's open, perfect for a return fitting. This one has a dash 6 connection on both sides. This side will go to our fuel pump, and on this side, I've got what used to be a dash 6 cap, but I've knocked the little cap piece out. This is now going to become a flare nut. Here's the cap piece. It's actually really easy to knock these out using a bolt to press on it and a vise. Here's our flare nut slid over some 3/8 nickel copper line. This stuff's really nice to work with. It's very easy to bend and easy to flare. All we'll have to do is flare this side, so it'll give us a nice connection over this AN when we tighten down the nut. One trick I learned from an Uncle Tony video forever ago is you want to extend your fuel pickup in the tank so that when you launch hard and all the fuel runs to the back of the tank, the line will be in the right place to pick it up. Now, the way I've always dealt with this on the Demon is by just keeping the tank pressed full at all times, basically. It also gives you extra weight in the back, so, you know, ballast. Since I can make this line as long as I want and shape it however I want, I'm going to aim it back toward the back of the tank. Although, the tank does angle up at the rear, so I don't know if I'm going to put it all the way to the back, since to then pick up fuel from that point, well, the tank would have to be like this full. After that, we're going to need some kind of pre-filter inside the tank to keep the chunks from getting sucked up into our new pump. Well, no matter. We've got a factory sock here. This actually fits 3/8 and 5/16 line. It's a universal replacement for both styles of sending unit. It'll pop right on here. We'll bottom it out on that first ridge, and then we'll have filtration. Now, I don't necessarily have to use this factory sending unit and cut it all up and drill holes in it, but it seems like the easiest way to get what I need. I could have cut out a round piece of metal and made it roughly the right shape and size. It's just, I don't know that it's going to end up sealing as well as this does. I frequently have crappy old gas tanks back here with crappy old sending units, and I would have cut up one of those, but I think Allan took them all to the scrapyard. I started by removing the fuel sending unit, obviously the float arms off of here. I drilled out the little rivet on here. I will save these pieces, although frankly I don't think I'll ever be rebuilding one of these in my life. I used a portaband to cut the original outlet nipple off. Now I think I'm going to use a drill bit to make this thing slowly disappear. It wasn't that slow. I clipped that little support bracket, and now we've got the two pieces separated. I do want to use that to support the new line if I can. Now I'm sizing the holes up very carefully. I need these to move, if anything, toward the center of the sending unit, not outward. If they move outward, they may be in the way of the lock ring and in the way of the sealing area down here inside the tank. And there's a problem immediately because, yeah, even if I can get the hole oversized, I can't get the fitting in. It's pretty big, you know, that hex section. It would certainly be interfering with this support dealy bob. And you know what? As tall as it is, it's probably going to support the line just as much as this bracket. So I think that's fine. We'll get rid of it. The only problem is the locating tabs are attached to that thing. So we'll no longer have anything to clock this in the tank. Notice I've drawn some arrows on there. That's going to be our guide. Now we're getting places. I did end up using a carbide bit to enlarge these holes so that they wouldn't go in random directions and I could just move them the way I needed them to. They didn't have to be perfectly concentric either, but pretty close to this size so that my little seal thing in here could do its job. Now I did say something about these being sealed with O-rings, but when you don't have a spot for that O-ring to sit, it just tries to blow out everywhere. So what I'm using instead are actually drain plug gaskets. These are metal with rubber rings in the center. Here's what I've got so far. As you can see, it does stick a good bit farther back than the factory one. I don't know that it's going to be this long. I did kind of eyeball this line inside the tank, but again, because of the angle up at the back, I don't think I want it in that corner. That would leave this much gas under it in most situations, and especially with the crazy rake in this car right now, that would be bad. Fitting, flared. Well, my first random stab ended up with the sock right here, and like perfectly on the bottom, lined up with where it'll be connected to the plate. So, you know what? I think I'm just going to go with that. Had to bend it a little bit, but it's pretty much perfect now. And I know that because right when this gets where it goes, I can tell it's just touching the bottom of the tank. I don't actually know how much fuel is left in it, but the sock is definitely touching that fuel, so that's good. I'll be running this thing on pump premium, at least for now. We're gonna dump a bunch of that in there fresh and dilute whatever's left in the tank. I was a little worried the sending unit might spin as I put the lock ring down, put some grease on the back side of it, and it stayed put perfectly. At this point, I can now start connecting the dots. I can run lines from the tank to the pump, from the pump to the filter, from the filter up to the regulator, which is not mounted yet, and then the return line from the regulator all the way back to the tank. Except I can't because I'm missing one fitting. I need a -6 90-degree fitting to go right here. I don't think I've yet mentioned that I don't actually like working with AN lines. They're too stabby. Also, I don't own soft jaws for my vise or proper AN wrenches, so things do tend to end up a little chowdery. That's like soft jaws. Also, I was criticized last time I was making AN fittings for using this giant adjustable wrench. Well, the reason I do that is it's got really wide, smooth jaws. So it's a little safer for these fittings. There's one entire line. Nice. The next fun part is I'm gonna have to run these lines here. And somebody put a header here, so I think I'm gonna have to come up with some kind of heat shield. I'll like clip them to the frame rail and then the shield will screw on here and come up in an L inside of the torsion bar and protect them. Because it's a fender well header, it hugs both sides of the frame rail. I was trying to come up with some clever way to run the lines outside through this piece or over the top maybe, but there's just nowhere else to go. I'm gonna go through here and then straight up, basically. Here's the return line laid in place. It snakes behind the pump here, goes along the frame rail. It's gonna connect onto these two bolts that hold the bracket thingy on with some of those little loopy guys. And then it comes under the frame right here, where it will tuck in and go behind that shield I'm gonna add, and then turn up here. You know, I was a little worried about the length of this hose. Not sure why, really. I've got lines passed up here. It's currently a horrible mess, but I'm getting an idea of where stuff is going to have to go. I think the regulator is actually going to go here. I want to mount it here, but the lower fitting is like in the fender well that way. So we'll go here. I'll be able to loop the lines kind of sort of not over the exhaust and then over to the regulator here. And then the two carb lines will come out just like that. Look at that. We've got almost half a roof. Moon. Wow. It's the next day, and I am not happy because somehow there's $335 in this box. And stuff is expensive. I also bought half of a race car electrical system. The plug wires were the big thing. I even got a deal on them, but still. Allan's here, and he magically guessed the total. Well, technically he said 336, so by Price is Right rules, he lost. It's a little while later. The gear chunk is back out so we can make it not leak fluid everywhere, like I should have done to begin with. Obviously, the axle shafts had to be pulled back out to do that, and Allan is working on fixing our e-brake problem. Allan's got the old gasket scraped off. I'll hit this with some brake cleaner and a rag and then put some silicone on here. I did get actual gaskets, but I've just decided silicone's probably the way to go, just in case this is warped, which does tend to happen. I don't want to take it apart again. Also, I noticed this. It's a leftover artifact from drilling that hole in the housing at the factory. Pretty cool. I've had some questions about the gear ratio in this chunk. I called it 489 because, well, it's hand labeled 489. I'd always heard it referred to as 488 previously. I did the math based on the number of teeth written here. It's 44 ring, 9 pinion. That gets you 4.888888889. So I guess it's 489. There's the complete fuel return line. Engine compartment to tank. Allan's got the brakes fully reassembled with all of the e-brake stuff done. Now we're adjusting the floppy e-brake cables and we'll see if it does anything. This seems promising. Yeah, that is brakes.
Don't move the car, I'm under it.
Yeah, that. As long as it then releases and spins again. Oh yeah, we're good. It's a little while later and we're doing more things. First off, we're replacing those nasty old U-bolts with some nice ones that won't try to kill me. Second, we're installing some pinion angle shims. Now, I don't know if this is the right amount of pinion angle shim, but it's the shim that I have, and so we're going for it. You see, our fancy super stock springs are angling the pinion up quite a bit thanks to all of that curvature. And that ain't right. For drag racing, we need a little bit of angle down, so then when I hit it and it lifts up, the pinion will be roughly straight in line with the transmission. The proper thing to do here would be actually, measuring, but I'm not going to do that. We're just going to throw these shims that I have in there and see what it looks like. Allan says hi, by the way. Allan's getting our shiny new U-bolts put on the other side. We've got both shims in place, and we'll see what the pinion angle looks like in a minute here when we actually tighten everything down. Meanwhile, I'm over here. We were missing the adjustment tab. If you know these 8 3/4 axles, you know that you can adjust the axle end play with factory bearings like these by spinning this greasy toothed wheel on the passenger side. Once you get it where it needs to be to allow the proper axle end play, which I swear this has, but I can't show you with 3 fingers, you need to lock it in place. I could not find the tab that came off this axle. I don't even know if it had one. But anyway, I made one out of a fender washer. It took a while. We've got wheels again, and we are back on them. Take a look at this pinion. Again, it's not like I'm measuring this thing precisely or anything, but you can tell it's no longer pointed way up into the stratosphere. It appears to be a little bit below level. Eyeballing the transmission side, it appears to be tipped down just a hair. So what we want to happen is on the hit, this thing is going to kick up, and then it will be angled up a little bit, and we should be good. The shim did also lower the rear end just a bit. Not enough, but I'll take what I can get. Okay, now I only have one AN line to go. If I'd had a second 90, I probably would have run this one up and then that way, but this works. The back line is in, and now I'm curious, does this pump? Well, it does something. There may not be enough fuel in that tank to pick up yet. Now, I've discussed this in the past, but frame-mounted pumps are pretty much never ideal. If you are going to use one, it needs to be installed below the level of fuel in the tank. Now, this one is mostly below the tank itself, but not actually like fully below the tank. Hopefully, it's enough. At this point, I'd like to put some gas in the Barracuda so I can purge those lines, but I'd really like to just start with premium so I'm ready to break the thing in. All I have on hand is regular, so I'm dumping this half a can of regular into my daily driver commuter here, which doesn't mind the cheap gas. Unlike most classic cars, this is actually easy. Well, as long as I don't pour gas all over the paint anyway. Okay. Watching the sending unit with apprehension, hoping nothing comes pouring out of here. Of course, I don't know if 5 gallons is enough to get up to the level of that thing or not. There's 5 gallons in it, no leaks. Hopefully it stays that way. I don't think I mentioned this. I'm powering the pump currently with my Cornwell jump box, which has a convenient off-on switch. All I want to hear is the pump pick up fuel and start moving it. I'm planning to purge these lines, but first we got to make sure that's actually possible. So let's do this. Okay, fuel. Now, as I was just about to explain, I haven't tightened all the fittings yet. I guess I'll go ahead and tighten this one. I want to purge these lines, but I'm not going to worry about anything from the tank to the filter. For one thing, we've already pumped fuel there. For another, there's the filter, so all the nastiness should end up in there, and hopefully it's just kind of fine. I thought I at least snugged this. Apparently not. Now what happened here is siphoning fuel. After I shut the pump off, gradually it started working its way down through the filter and then piddling out right there. That tells me that all of our connections back here are good, and the position of the pump relative to the tank is probably fine because it's able to be fed via gravity. Okay, so this is tight now. We won't have any leaks at the filter. This one I've already tightened. Next, we're gonna go up to the regulator. I'm gonna take the line from this off of the regulator, put it in a can, then turn the pump on. We're gonna purge that line with fuel, then we'll connect that to the regulator. We'll do the same thing with the feed lines to the carbs, and then finally the return line. One hand on the bottle, one on the switch. Yeah, that's moving some fuel. And don't see any debris, so that's good. Obviously the idea here is to catch any chunks that were left in the hose from the process of building it. Yeah, we are golden there. All right, we're purging these now, but they kind of already purged themselves everywhere. And there we've got return line fuel. Nice. Return line's connected to the tank. Here's a leak check on that. I bet that pump's really loud where I have this camera. You know, I almost mounted that pump in some rubber. I think that would have been a good idea. No leaks yet, but we're currently regulated way down to like 2 PSI. So I'm gonna crank this up to about maybe 5.5 or 6, something like that. We're certainly not ready to fire. I mean, for one thing, we don't have an ignition system, but I did check and the bowls are full. Both accelerator pumps are still good, so that is excellent news. When the time comes, these carbs are ready to rock. I was smelling some fuel while the pump was running. Guess I didn't get this reefed hard enough. I'm gonna grab 2 wrenches. Fixed. Oh, haven't visited the list in a couple days. That's done. That's done. We've got headers, but we don't have mufflers, which I will be using to break it in. Got to do that. That's done. That's done. I think that's it. Drive shaft looped. It's not quite centered. I think I'm going to flip these fasteners so the shorter head is on this side, and then we'll test fit the drive line and see if it's not going to rub. Allan filled the rear diff with fluid, and I retorqued the nuts, which I swear I'd already done, but the little drip coming down here determined that was a lie. Allan's now got the 4-speed full of fluid, so we're running out of things to do under here. Currently working on torquing hardware on the leaf springs and the rear end. Then I'm going to install the drive shaft here. I do need to swap this rear U-joint for a conversion joint first. See, this shaft was built in the larger diameter with the larger joints, but this 489 case has the smaller joint, same as the Demon has. The Moog/Precision/whoever number for the U-joint that converts between small Mopar and big Mopar is 347. I've actually memorized that after needing this many times over the years. This was a brand new drive line. I don't remember where I got it. It happens to be the right length for this and the Demon, so I was using it for a spare. That's why it looks like it's been in a swamp, because it sat in the ramp truck toolbox for quite a while, and that thing gets wet inside. You would think a new drive line would have like a nice tight fit in the ears here, but it doesn't, like not at all. Like there's basically zero press. The old joint came out with very little effort, and the new one, these caps just go right in there basically. So I'm gonna end up staking this. Hopefully that'll be good enough. We've got a drive shaft. Yeah, it didn't end up perfectly centered in the loop. This thing was farther that way when I started, and somehow by the time I drilled all the holes and mounted it, it moved that way. We are good. It's not gonna hit. I'd like it if it were more centered. I'd like if this was more up that way, but this is kind of the best I can do right now. This e-brake cable is very close to the drive line. It was closer and still not touching it somehow, but I bent the brackets to secure it to the floor just a little bit so we've got some daylight. What do you know about bump stops? I'll tell you what I know. We're gonna want one on this car that's tall enough to keep this tire from getting shoved into the cut quarter panel in case the impossible happens and this suspension gets fully compressed. This is an unlikely scenario, but still it's one I want to prepare for. As you can tell, we've got like a 3 to 4 inch gap to the top of the tire right now. With the super stock springs and the factory bump stop, we've got a gap here of like, I don't know, 8 inches maybe? To get the axle housing to hit a bump stop before the tires hit the quarter panel, we need the bump stop to be right about here. I don't have anything tall enough to do that on hand, but I do have this. This is a factory bump stop from the tail end of my 3rd gen truck I no longer own. I had to remove these to install a set of airbags, and they're just sitting around. It looks like they might actually bolt right in place of the originals. Yeah, so I'm going to throw that in there. That gets us part of the way, like an inch closer. But down the line, we're going to have to space these down anyway. Yeah, that's a start. I'm thinking we'll probably end up spacing that down with some sort of tubing or something, but that's down the line. Exhaust. This is the glorious, and by glorious I mean terrible, 3-inch glass pack setup that was on this car previously. It did used to have 90-degree sections that turned here and dumped right in front of the rear tires, which was awesome. And by awesome, yes, I do mean terrible. Because the back of the car was like 4 or 5 inches closer to the ground, these things were always scraping on everything. It was kind of cool having a 3-inch circular tip right here that you could shoot fireballs out of if you did things right. I figure right now this is better than straight pipe exhaust for a 20-minute cam break-in, so we threw it back on there for temporary use. Once that's done, I'm going to come up with some sort of 3-inch header extension that'll hopefully be like 18 inches or so long. It'll probably terminate right there, and we'll probably put some kind of hanger system in there. There's nothing at all supporting this at present, so I'm going to get some mechanics wire or something. I'd use a ratchet strap, but it'll definitely melt. Allan came over and struck some things from the list. At this point, we're mostly done underneath the car. We still need to do the idler and pitman arms, and then we do need to align the front end. Notice that stuff's not even on the list. However, at this point, I'm thinking it's important to push toward an engine that actually runs. So for the sake of morale and really my own enjoyment, I think it's time to sprint toward the finish line on that. Let's work on an electrical system, accessories, and cooling, and see if we can hear it make engine noises. Did I put the car down on the ground forgetting to install the all-important U-joint straps? I don't know. Would I tell you if I did? To have an electrical system, we first need to have a battery. I've been hoarding this battery box setup thing to put a battery in the trunk of this car for years now. I've only just realized I actually hate it. First, it's gigantic. Second, it's all polished and ridiculous. And finally, when you assemble that thing, it encloses the battery. In the turbo car, I bolted down the factory battery tray to this area of the trunk. Then I used a regular hold down and battery hold down stud thingies to secure the battery. I would do this if it jibed with NHRA rules. You can only do this if you have a firewall here. And because this is still made of plywood and I've yet to figure out how I'm going to do this. Yeah, so it has to go there. In fact, I should probably check and make sure this even fits around that. It fits, but not by much. Of course, I'm missing fasteners to put the box together, so we'll get to that in a bit, or tomorrow. Meanwhile, Allan's going to mount our master cutoff switch. To do this, we're going to drill a hole in the car. And I'd be worried about that, except this panel is full of Bondo. Like, it's really bad. Yeah, there-ish. Sure. Don't drill your belly. Dude, I thought there was less Bondo over here. Like it never happened. It's time for everybody's favorite activity once again, and that is sketching an electrical system from scratch. On the left, we've got all the circuits I can think of, and on the right, all of the switches. We're going to start with main power coming through a breaker off of the cutoff switch all the way up to the main power switch in the dash. That switch is going to power the ignition switch, fuel switch, the starter button, and the light switch. Now there will be a brake light switch here which will be powered separately. That way if this ever dies, we'll still have brake lights. Shouldn't be all that important on a racetrack, but you never know.
Those fingerprints were not me.
Okay. Yeah. I think Allan and I have pretty equal hatred for this horrible film stuff. I've got a basic power flow chart here. The ignition switch is going to power up the MSD, although there's also an MSD battery feed that'll come all the way from the very back. There's a charge excite wire for our 1-wire GM alternator. That'll also come off of that ignition switch. We've got a fuel pump switch that's going to trigger the fuel pump relay. I do have a pump relay kit, so I've got wiring for that. It'll be fed straight off of the cutoff switch as well. So yeah, it'll just be a trigger wire going back to that. And then the main wire will go through the floor. We've got a starter button here that's just a momentary press button. It's going to trigger a relay. That relay is going to be triggered through a neutral safety switch. I don't know if I'll use the ground side or if I'll just run actual power through this. I wouldn't even need a relay if I did that. We'll figure that out in a while. I don't have the switch yet anyway. It's going to have to be mounted above the clutch pedal. And then, of course, we've got a light switch. Now, this is going to power up our headlights, our tail lights, and gauge lights, although I don't currently have gauge lights. There is one in the tachometer, but I don't have the others. I'm not worried about any of that stuff for now. That'll be a later thing. The alternator circuit will be pretty simple. It's going to go from the output lug on the alternator to the big lug on the starter through a big gigantic maxi fuse. I bought a holder for that. From the factory, the wiring goes up the driver's side through this channel here. I'm going to leave the lighting wiring over there. We have the factory lighting harness, but of course we kind of cut some of it in half. Over here on the passenger side, I'm going to run our main wiring. We've got the 2 wires for the MSD here. This is 14 gauge, red and black. Those will go straight to battery, but actually the battery cutoff switch. And then I've got a main breaker here. Now this is only a 13 amp breaker. This is going to power the main switch, which will power the other switches. I think 30 amps will be fine. We can always step that up if we have to, or we could add a lighting relay. There are options. The factory wiring over on the driver's side runs through this hole up over the wheel well. I'm going to mimic that over here on the passenger side and try not to jam it in the open hole where we cut the quarter panel. We'll see how well that works out. Anyway, I've got this run through for a pull wire. I'm going to tape those together real fast and then we'll go in the trunk. I got annoyed with wiring, although I have been successful in getting a few circuits done. Anyway, I decided to bounce back to accessories here. We need all of this to work to have a working alternator so I can wire that. So there you go. It's a good excuse. Now things are getting a little complicated. As you can see, we've got a 4-blade fan here. This is off of a slant 6. That was a common piece for performance Chryslers in the 1960s. I kind of wanted to put an electric fan on here, but, well, number 1, I don't have one. Number 2, I don't have much time. Number 3, it'll make the wiring job simpler. And number 4, I guess that was it. Anyway, we're going to use the slant 6 fan. We're going to use the factory spacer there, which has been ground on for no reasons you need to worry about. We've got a fancy pulley that matches our lower pulley. Incidentally, Allan removed this from that van we've gotten tons and tons of useful stuff off of. Inside of that pulley, we've got a 1/2-inch spacer and a 1/4-inch shim. Now the problem is that spacer in there doesn't have a long enough snout to go out and center our outer spacer. So hopefully it's okay. So it's all tightened down and the spacing looks just about right and I'm pleased with that, but look at the pulley. It's not straight. Why? I'm really only using it because it's shiny and it matches that one, which is absolutely ridiculous. We've got accessories. The belt's kind of old. And yeah, I'm just gonna ignore the pulley thing for now. We have Radiator, kind of, but there's immediately a problem. Yeah, no fitty. Weird. Tiny slant 6 fan hits that. Okay, the radiator's actually in, and the fan is now on without a spacer. I can't help but notice that this hose is gonna be really close. It's a darn good thing we've got solid engine mounts, isn't it? I will tell you I had to mangle the radiator support a little bit to make it fit. You can see this obvious piece, but then up here there's also a horizontal section, and the bracket sets the radiator far enough this way that had to be moved. Notice the radiator is tilted this direction? They're always like that. Matter of fact, the drivetrain is tilted that direction. We need an overflow tank because race car, and I happen to have one. I'm gonna put it here somewhere. I think I'll probably bend that top section of the bracket, drill a hole here, drill a hole down there, and everything will be great. It's ugly and plastic, and I hate it, but, you know, we gotta have it. Look at this now. It's beautiful. It's majestic. All of the major pieces are finally in place. Oh, wait, there's one more. The glorious black 6AL2 box to match the MT covers, of course. And tomorrow, we'll probably make that do things. It's the next day, and we're learning things. One of those things is that there are actually different sizes of 4-bladed fans. This one is smaller and won't hit the upper radiator hose or the radiator tank. So Allan's gonna clean this thing up. We'll hit it with some fresh paint, and we'll put this in place of the big gigantic one I already installed. Another thing we're learning, or relearning really, is that there is zero room for plug wires on this stupid thing. You can see I did get these high temp boots. Unlike the ones at the parts store, which were $10 a piece, these were $14 for 8 off Amazon, delivered in a day. I'm gonna have to come up with some kind of holders to pull these things away from the exhaust. Obviously the boot is there for protection, but that doesn't mean we want it sitting here, you know? The plug wire situation in here is so sketchy. But here's what I'm thinking. I've got 5 and 7 on now. I'm gonna use one of these cable hose holder thingies I was using for the fuel hose as a holder and separator. You can see what I've done there is kind of squished a line in the center, so it keeps the two wires separate from each other. We shouldn't have any crossfiring, hopefully. Obviously these are rubber coated, and they fit perfectly over the studs for the T-handles. Initially I was planning to run them over the valve covers, but I don't really have hardware to do that right now. The rear two wires go that way pretty handily. I think the front two may have to go around the long way. This is a set of MSD Street Fire roll your own plug wires. Certainly overkill for the 300-ish horsepower we're gonna make with this thing, but you know, future proofing. We'll make this set for the car and then they'll be on the car forever and always. I'm gonna try and not cut them too short. I'm putting a little bit of extra slack right here so we can make timing adjustments. That's looking pretty good. I am short a couple of these. I know I'm gonna need 4 on the other side, and I think I still need 1 more for the big fuel line. It's pretty tidy, and I do like this goldish accent of the titanium high temperature wire boots. I always seal up these thermostats with the right stuff, and they always leak. So this time, Allan's installing it with that aviation sealant stuff. You know, the forbidden steak sauce. It smells tremendous. We'll see if that works any better. We're mounting things, like the 6AL 2 box, for example. It's on these rubber isolator feet, which Allan is currently bolting down to the car. Shiny new fan is in. Allan did a great job cleaning that thing up and painting it silver. Much, much better. So now maybe that'll stay there. I'm working on getting the ignition coil mounted. We considered different spots like here where there's plenty of room, but then we'd have a wire going over here and I have no great way to mount that. So what we ended up doing was following Allan's idea, moving the fuel hoses off of that screw to this screw on this nifty heater delete plate he put in, and that made a perfect spot right here to mount the coil. I have to drill a second hole, and I need to get the height on this thing set just right. Might also bend this bracket ever so slightly, because currently that would block the valve cover from coming out, and that is not acceptable. Overflow tank is mounted. Now it's time to crimp some plug wire ends. I'm doing the coil wire first just to test out my technique here. You see, MSD includes that fancy plastic slide together thing you can use to crimp these in a vise. But because I've already got these routed and installed, I really want to do it right here on the engine. With these conventional terminals, it's really easy. You just cut the wire where you want it, you strip about 1/2 inch, you roll the electrode over the top of the wire so it ends up inside the crimp here. You put a little bend on these tabs as they explain in the instructions so it'll grab the wire better, and then you fold it over. I'm doing that with a pair of pliers that have this little round section in them, so that's working pretty well. I can also back that up with my hand crimp tool, just making sure these are stabbed in enough. These are 90-degree boots. I'm sliding the boots over the wire first. I slid my Phillips screwdriver in the open end, held this with my other hand, and bent it with the screwdriver handle. Worked pretty well. Now I need more hands, but I'll just slide the boot out there, and we've got one done. Allan made and installed a firewall connector delete plate. Initially, I was planning to put a grommet through here for a wiring pass-through, but since most of my wiring needs to be over here anyway, I'm just gonna punch a hole right through above the fender well, and I'll add a second one over here that all the lighting stuff will go through. I'm back from a brief odyssey to the parts store to get more of these wiring clips. I returned with a pair of radiator hoses that somehow fit perfectly, a new V-belt, some other odds and ends, but no wiring clips because I bought them all the other day. Allan's going to a different parts store for those. Radiator hosed. Sure glad I hoard clamps because I didn't think to buy new ones. At least 1 or 2 of them say USA on them. That's kind of nice. Overflow tank is plumbed. That's some vacuum/overflow hose. I did have to swell it to fit over this, but that's fine. It comes down here through the factory hold down, loops underneath the tank, and connects to it there. I'll probably add a dump line here at some point, or maybe some kind of breather. This does have to be open to the atmosphere. It cannot be plugged. If your overflow is plugged such that it can't vent pressure off, bad stuff will happen. Water time. No antifreeze in here because race car. I am going to use some additive that will hopefully help with corrosion protection and lubricating the water pump. But we're going to be running straight water. You'll notice this is drinking water. I read somewhere it's actually better to use drinking water than distilled water. So that's what we're doing. For the magic additive, I'm going to use Rizlone Hypercool Supercoolant. I probably would have used water wetter, but this cost half as much. And I like half as much. We've got 3 gallons of water and the additive in the cooling system now, and it's not quite filled up to the fins here. Allan said he was going to get 4 gallons. I said, nah, 3's plenty. It wasn't. I got some more water. I topped up the radiator. Well, not topped up, but I filled it up to like here. Pressure checked it at 13 or 15 PSI, whatever. There was a little drip from a bolt here, a little drip from a bolt there, which is pretty common. I tightened up all of those, which did improve it. Might have been a little bit residual, but by the time those bolts cover in rust, they'll seal themselves. We do, of course, have a little tiny bit of water here. So I retorqued the thermostat housing for a 3rd time, which definitely won't fix it. I've got all of the plug wires done. They turned out pretty nice. This side looks a good bit tidier because we don't have fuel stuff in the way. I'm really proud of that. Finishing the installation of my triple pod gauges real fast. This is a vacuum gauge. I've got this carefully routed through here so it doesn't hit the coil wire. It goes through the old hood spring thing bracket, barely misses the coil, then turns around and connects to the back of the front carburetor. One of my other tunnel rams has a vacuum connection in the open plenum here. As you can see, this one does not, so I do have to run it to this position. And there's that line connected up. I managed to find a 90-degree AN to pipe thread fitting. I know I mentioned all the ridiculously expensive AN fuel system stuff came from Tom with Rocket. So did this giant bucket of AN fittings. This has been a godsend for this project. I've needed all kinds of goofy little adapters out of here, and I have found every one of them. The only thing that isn't in this bucket, hose ends. That's okay. They're only $20 a piece at the local parts store. And yes, I could order them online for cheaper, but time's kind of the essence here. I haven't even mentioned yet, there's another Bremerton test and tune tomorrow. So if we could just hear this thing run really fast, and then fix the floor, and then fix the alignment and replace the idler and pitman arms, and then put the driver's seat back in, well, and wire the entire car, we might just be able to go to that. I'm not betting on that just yet, but hey, it's important to have goals. I do have our carburetors connected together now with this linkage kit. I did synchronize these, by which I mean I fully closed both of these throttles all the way, then screwed these down, and now I've got it adjusted to something that should give us a relatively high idle. Obviously, we'll tweak that to 2,000 RPM once this thing fires up, and there it will sit for 20 minutes, I hope. What do you know about floors? You know, I don't think I ever explained this alternator mounting. I actually built this for that black Power Wagon like 5 or 6 years ago. Really glad I parted that thing out now. I have a nicer, newer alternator over there, but I can't be bothered to swap that in. Anyway, I'm working on wiring the MSD system right now, as well as the rest of the car, of course. We've got our two main power wires here. These are the ones I'm extending connections from all the way in the back at the battery. This is the ignition trigger. This will come from our ignition switch. The black and the orange go to the coil, which is mounted here, of course. Usually there are longer wires that'll like reach, but these are cut off super short for some reason, so I'll be making extensions for that. And then finally, we've got the blue wire over here. This is going to be for the two-step. I don't have a switch for that right now, and I'm not going to worry about it.
Just gonna hit the transition?
Nah, you got tons of room.
Okay.
Look at how much floor this thing has now. This is more floor than it's had in a very long time. We did test the shifter action. This doesn't interfere with anything. This is a stop bracket, so that's actually a perfect thing to have floor hitting. Obviously, the transmission's going to vibrate and move around a little bit, so we'll probably try and make sure this isn't on it. But what's another rattle? This thing's going to be made out of rattles. We're back at the list. We can take things off. Thermostat, rad hoses, coolant, install MSD. Main power wire's still not done. We need to go back up and shim the starter. Plug wires are done. Well, of course, I had to put more things on the list, but still, progress. Man, so many things have happened. So few of those things have actually been filmed. We've just been all gas today trying to get this thing fired up, and it didn't quite happen, but it's very close. Obscenely close even. The MSD is fully wired. We've got an excite wire for our alternator here. Charge wire is not terminated, but it is laid in place. I'm putting it in these spark plug wire holders. It's going to jump over, go to that big giant main fuse holder, and then that'll go down to the main stud on the starter. I found a return spring bracket. I do need to set up some return springs. I hope this is enough return spring. I know you're required to have 2 of them, so I have 2 of them. I had to make up a little mounting piece for my temperature gauge here because one of those was missing. That's done. It is mounted in there. I've got the probe wire here. It's kind of snaking down with the vacuum connection to the temperature probe up at the front. I've got a power wire here. This comes off of the same wire that triggers the MSD and excites the alternator. This is going to power the gauge. It'll be connected here. Then we just need a ground and we're good. I'm not running an MSD 6AL 2-box because I have to run MSD. It's not about the multiple spark. I could give a crap about that. I need a red line, and I'd also like a 2-step to launch on. Now, I have not run a wire for the 2-step yet. That's this blue wire right here. I don't even have a button for it, so I think that's going to be a later thing. But I will get in here and set the rev limiter correctly. Maybe I'll undo this and run it through the holder too. I don't know. I'm trying to keep these systems separate, but ultimately there was really no other good way to run this cable. I could have gone all the way out here, but I didn't have enough length. And you know what? This is kind of nice. Look at the amount of floor Allan managed to get in here. This is great. We can't see much of the ground. There's some small holes here we need to fill, but that's fine. Eventually we'll put a seat here and that'll hide some of this mess. And I think we're going to clean this all out and paint it. Again, not right now, but eventually. I've had this can of paint here for that job. Well, it wasn't even for this car. It was for another car like 5 years ago, but maybe we'll finally use it. The main power and MSD power and ground harness from the back comes through here. I've got a 30 amp breaker secured there, and then the power wire comes off of that, which will go to our fuse panel. I'm going to mount right in there. Now you may be wondering why the breaker is here. Well, that's because I didn't have enough wire to get all the way from the battery up to here in one piece, and it seemed like a good idea. Notice I wrapped this harness up, because I was done, because I didn't need any more wires in there. Fuel pump excite wire. Here's the piece I've made up for the switch panel. I've already got 4 holes marked up here. These are going to be the mounting holes, and this top ½ inch or so will be bent over at a 90-ish degree angle to mount this to the dash. Before I do that, I will drill those screw holes, and then I'll drill holes here for all of the switches and the starter button we're going to need. I really like the wiring pass-throughs here. They should have come like that from the factory. Ah yes, we found this super neat red handle for the battery cutoff switch on the engine run stand, which I've never finished. So that's on here now, and I even labeled it. Anyway, lots more to do tomorrow. If we don't get this thing fired up, we're going to lose the shop or something. It's the next day, and I'm wrapping up some last-minute wiring stuff before we can put the car back in the air, do the main power wire, shim the starter, and do all the other things that need done. I've just finished joining the charge wire to this big, gigantic maxi fuse holder, which I attached to this little wiring delete plate Allan made with 1 screw. So you can see I used the world's biggest butt splices and some heat shrink to make the connections between the wire and the fuse holder lengths. I've got the slack off of a 5-foot roll of 8 gauge or whatever the heck this is attached to this side, which should be more than long enough to get down to the starter where this is going to make the connection to the battery feed cable. This is going to be our trigger wire. I'm going to wrap it together with that. Maybe put them in some kind of protective something as I pass them down there to get to the starter. By George, I think I've solved reverse. The important part here is a factory A-body reverse piece of linkage. Normally this would have bent like vertical right here, but I had to extend this quite a bit to get back to here. Now here, I've got a short Hurst handle and it's pivoting on a carriage bolt. That carriage bolt is bolted to this spacer. There are washers around the shifter handle. And then on this side, we've got a nylock. So I was able to get exactly the right amount of tension on there, and it should stay where I put it. There's a bolt in here holding this lever onto the handle. If this does work, I'll be welding this because we're certainly not going to rely on 1 5/16 bolt to keep that in place. Anyway, I had to make some modifications here because this wouldn't go all the way into our lever extension piece, but it now fits. It's clipped on both sides. It's adjusted to perfection. And so all I need to do now, make sure it works. Well, it would if the thing was like running and we had a clutch, but currently the teeth aren't quite lining up, so it won't mesh all the way. There's our fully engaged position, straight up and down, basically. The original reverse shifter on the Vertigate actually kind of looked like that. It pivoted right here and sort of bent over. It had a pin which would slide right here, so anytime this thing was in a forward gear, reverse couldn't be engaged. Obviously, we don't have that, but I'm hopeful the amount of difficulty it takes to engage reverse and, reach way over to get at it will prevent any accidental shifting. Allan's got the starter loose now. You can see with the bolts out of it, the gear is no longer stuck engaged with the ring gear. What we're going to do here is sandwich a couple washers between the starter body and the scatter shield to kick the gear this way. That's exactly what we did on the Demon like 2 or 3 years ago, and it's still that way. So I know it works. We're going to use 2 washers just to make absolutely sure. If you're not aware, these washers are not a uniform thickness. In fact, they vary a whole lot. So I did a couple different stacks here. I'm going to use these, which seem to match pretty well. There it is back in place, which was not fun, by the way. Replacing this starter would be really challenging. I hope it fits out this gap. It's quite a while later, and the main positive battery cable is now routed under the car. I've got it in a clamp here. I've got it tied to the studs that secure the battery to the trunk. It goes through a grommet here, then a clamp here, then a clamp here, and then I've got it grommeted through the frame where the original fuel line went. I've now got the starter end connections made up. This is a copper lug that's crimped on there. I did this using this silly crimp tool, which I'm getting the hang of using, but it's still not the greatest in the world. Anyway, obviously we've got some heat shrink on there, and then these 2 cables, we've got the alternator cable, and then the trigger wire. Well, it wasn't fun or easy, but the starter's finally wired. You can see the heat shield stuff I ran the wiring through, making a nice turn up the firewall right there. Got the reverse lever welded up. Not nicely or anything, but it is welded. Yeah, more wiring stuff. This is going to be the harness that goes down the driver's side of the car. This has the 2 lighting circuits in it, and then also a wire to activate the fuel pump relay, which I've just installed in the trunk. It's over here next to the battery box. There's also another breaker here for the pump. I need to get the new harness run through where the old harness was, and since we already kind of destroyed that, I cut the remains of it, tape this all together, and we'll do the electrician's trick again, pulling that through. Hopefully when I'm done, this wiring will actually be clipped in where it's supposed to be, and we won't see it hanging through the wheel opening here. All right, so this isn't exactly done. Obviously, it's a horrible mess, but I do have a fuel pump trigger wire that if I touch here, oh yeah, buddy, this is a starter trigger. So if I do this, we should hear more noises. Yeah! At this point, I could totally twist 3 wires together and just make the car run. But as Allan points out, if I do that now, this is never getting done right. So we'll just make up the switch panel real fast. Look at this. The shifter area is enclosed. A reverse shifter has this sweet little slot. And we've got a box around the main shifter. This has really come together. Getting around the seat was a little tricky, but that's fine. It's way better than a hole. Switch panel. I'm putting the light switch in the factory light switch location, even though it's just a toggle switch. It seemed like the thing to do. So in this panel, we're gonna have main power, ignition, fuel pump, and start. Once I knew that, I knew I needed 4 holes. I spaced them out evenly-ish. I drilled the mounting holes, and then I bent it. I'm not sure on this angle yet. It might need a little bit more. Wiring the fuse panel. This is just one of those basic point-to-point AGC glass fuse panels. As you can see, I've got 3 fuses. I'm currently only using 2. This is a 30 amp main. This is a 10 amp ignition. And then this is a 10 amp lighting fuse. I did do future me a big favor and make almost all of these wires red. Dude, it's been dry for weeks. And we're almost ready to roll this thing outside and fire it up. It starts raining. Perfect. Welcome to Grays Harbor. This is probably obvious, but the less wiring you can do standing on your head, the better. I've got all the point-to-point connections made on our switch panel now, and I'm ready to screw this thing into the car. We've got our main switch over here. I've got individual wires going to both the ignition and fuel switches and over to the starter button. We'll have an output here to the starter wire. We'll add wires here that go to the fuel relay and then the ignition circuit, and this will be power coming in. The black wires are grounds because these middle switches are lighted. They're kind of cheesy plastic things. That's what I got on hand. I don't love that. I'd like to have something nicer in the future, but because they've got lights, I decided to make them work. There we go. All the external stuff is connected to the panel now. This is basically all permanent, although I still need to tidy all the wiring. And the white wire is going straight out to the starter. That's going to go through a neutral safety switch above the clutch. There's also going to be an auxiliary start button, which you can see the back of, I don't know, in there somewhere. Yeah, it's not centered, but it is on there. We should have nothing anywhere. Now we have that. There's ignition. It's not lit up. That's not lit up. Did I not? That's weird. We're not getting any poop. I'm so confused. Hold on. Yeah, so these switches are actually total garbage. When I bypassed them with a screwdriver, they worked. Then, of course, I blew the fuse, accidentally arcing out to ground. I hate everything. Okay, I threw away those 2 garbage plastic switches. I got 2 different garbage plastic switches, but these ones actually work. This one, you can't really see the light. It is in there, but what was the point? Anyway, I think we're ready. Finally. Now, obviously, we've yet to test the ignition, but with the ignition switch on, the water gauge is moving up to almost 150 degrees, which means I've got the wrong sensor for that gauge. And the light is flashing on the MSD. So we're probably gonna have something here. Okay, we're gonna leak check the fuel system again. Pretty sure we're good here. I've got the timing light connected. I'm taking power off of the alternator stud, and obviously that big fuse hasn't blown because it is working, so that's great. I've got this routed up to number 1 by the cap. Hopefully that's sufficient. I can't really sneak it in here, which is inconvenient. I did make it slightly harder to see the mark by spacing out the alternator bracket to deal with that 1-wire situation. You know, I could grind this way down and move it in. Whatever, future projects. Anyway, I can see it well enough. I've got my trusty flathead and my snap-on thermal imager thing so we can check temperatures. All right, say a prayer, I guess. Button. Ha! It needs more timing, probably. thermostat just opened, I think. Well, maybe not yet. Just a little bit of heat in there. Headers aren't glowing. Timing's sitting about 28 degrees right now. The front two look colder because they're by themselves, but that makes sense. There is a big exhaust leak right here, and I knew that was going to happen. I don't know why it's smoking so bad. The mufflers were full of oil, but I would have expected that to be gone by now. There's temperature under the thermostat. Hovering right around 200, depending on what spot you're looking at. Radiator, very, very cold. Interesting. Still billowing smoke. I don't know, is this thing like super mega rich or something? No. Maybe I should have just preemptively stepped the needles down for the 273, but I didn't do that. Okay, temperature gauge is moving. It's loud in here, but it's not, you know, too loud. But of course, when I'm racing, it won't have the mufflers. So there's that. I've yet to catch the radiator actually hot. So I don't know if the thermostat is cycling and it's just pulling the temperature right down, or if the little bypass holes I drilled in there are enough to keep it right at this temperature and not open the thermostat. Well, I can't shut it off now. We're 3/4 of the way through the cam break-in. Hopefully I still have a ring seal when we're done. Oh, you bastard! You know, for not having a shroud, the airflow off this fan is amazing. There's nothing here. It's all right here. It's pulling straight back. All right, that's 20 minutes. Let's see what it do. Oh, need more hands. Lazy. Gotta check the timing. And torque the valve covers. Every time. Every time. Yeah, that needs way more timing. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. That one's hot. Is that? Please don't spit all over the radiator. Come on. Well, that's cool. Well, we're testing the maximum operating temperature of these spark plug wire boots. Yeah, it got a little hot. We might have a thermostat problem here. You know, it wasn't getting hot when it was revving up and circulating water. It may have only been passing coolant through those two little holes I drilled. I forgot, I only actually drilled one hole. Pretty sure that was the only thing passing coolant through the radiator for this entire cam break-in. And it was fine. Well, until the very end anyway. I guess we'll look into that later. Definitely time for a victory lap anyway. It ran, and it didn't explode immediately. It's a little while later, this thing is fully cooled down, and what's going on with this puke? That was fully clean water I put in there. Brand new radiator, brand new hoses, freshly machined block, heads, all cleaned thoroughly. Aside from the small amount of coolant that left the fun way, we really didn't lose any. This is basically right where I put it. Now that this isn't 300 degrees, I can retighten the T-handles. I did actually burn my finger on that one. I'm losing my voice, I don't like it. Now the thing I'm most worried about, that. I don't think that was valve cover. Pretty sure that's oil filter adapter, and that is not good news. It could well have something to do with the 90 to 100 PSI of oil pressure when this thing's cold. More, actually. I saw that needle, like, here. What are we gonna do about that? Get rid of the straight weight oil because that was stupid. Put something more normal in there and see what happens. Yeah, Yeah, a throttle pedal would be really helpful about now.
Now you can see how much coolant circulating, even with the thermostat closed. So that's what it was. Okay, new thermostat it is.
It definitely wants some more timing. All in, it's like 27, 28, but it's got most of that in idle, if not all of it. Remember, this is Dale's Distributor with super light springs in it. So it's almost like being locked out, basically, once it's fired up. Sounds okay. Wanted to check the step-up springs. I was a little worried they might be too strong. These are loose. Nothing's dancing. And they all pop right up, right in unison. That's cool. It basically is not smoking now. Maybe a little bit. I leaned out the idle some. I still haven't really dialed them in, and I will do that, but this is pretty good. Man, what a day. What a week. What a month, really. I have dreamed about this car for years. I've schemed every part, every system. I've collected little bits. I've amassed a mountain of things, and now, finally, they are all bolted to this car. Every time with these guys. That is not to suggest that it's done by any means. As a matter of fact, it's pretty far from it. There's a long list of things that still need to be finished before I can leave for No Name. But for the moment, we've got an engine that runs, and I am content to just kind of stare at it and enjoy a celebratory frosty cold adult beverage. Well, that and sit here and play with the shifters, plural. I'm really proud of that. And that. Yep. Pretty cool. Lots more to come on the Barracuda in the very near future. Tuning, alignment, an oil change. Maybe we'll cut open a filter. Finish the wiring. That's thunder. I hope you'll stick around to see that. Until then, as ever, thank you very much for watching. And remember, race car backwards is race car. Race car upside down is expensive.